Everybody, I'm super excited to have Nicole Vignola here. She's a neuroscientist, corporate consultant, a consultant of people, many people actually. She's an author, a speaker, and she's committed to making neuroscience tangible. And she really does that in her book that's about to come out in the beginning of June called Rewire, Your NeuroKit for Everyday Life. I actually just finished it. My favorite part is that it's so relevant for people. Everything that is in this book is stuff that everybody deals with. And she's able to speak about scientific concepts, especially how the brain works, which is a very complicated matter, in a very simple and tangible way. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited for you to be here. The thing that struck me was, why did you start to decide to dive into neuroscience? Because I feel like you did this later on in life, right? Like it wasn't just like a solid trajectory from childhood to college to neuroscientist. You had some life experience before you decided to go this route. So what stimulated that?
Well, I actually pretty much failed high school, almost. I mean, I finished with a D, which I don't know if you can consider that a pass because you can't get into any college with those grades. I then moved to England and they were doing this thing called access to higher education. So basically it was for adults to kind of redeem themselves and do this 1 year at college, which then could get you into university. And I didn't know that that was a thing. I overheard someone talking about it in the gym and I was like, what? You can do that? I can redo my sort of formative years and redo it. And they were like, yeah, you can study medicine, you can become a doctor, you can become a physiotherapist, a neuroscientist. And that was my kind of breakthrough. I, by accident, heard that you could redeem yourself in adult life in England. So I did this course. I then went to study neuroscience. I then did my master's in organizational psychology because I wanted to bring neuroscience out of the lab and into the masses, make it accessible to people so we could use it in our everyday life like I've done in Rewire.
That's amazing. That's like a perfect success story for that program.
Yeah.
Somebody,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool. I mean, it worked out for you. And
Yes.
there's so much of your personal life in this book.
Thank you. Yes. There's a
I
lot I
think
haven't shared.
this book is, for me, it's interesting because in the circles that I roll with, we're always talking about reprogramming, and you're basically talking about rewiring. That's the term that you use, and you really get into the chemicals in the brain and how it all works. How did you decide to write this book? Like, where did the inspiration come from?
So I already had a course that I was running. So I had a kind of blueprint to how I was teaching this kind of method. I got approached by HarperCollins in the US, Penguin in the UK. And to be honest, I always knew I wanted to write a book, but I wasn't planning on writing one so soon. They ended up in my inbox and I thought, well, I'm just going to do it. So I always thought Big Nicole would write a book, but it appears at present Nicole's written one. And I always say that, you gain confidence by going to places where you have none. So I really just kind of dove in and I thought I already have this blueprint for what I'd like to write. And I didn't really know what the ending was going to be, if I'm completely honest, but once I started writing, it started becoming more apparent, and my editor helped me with the structuring of kind of the phase 1, 2, and 3. Apparently, that's a recipe for success in the self-help section of books, and that kind of helped me solidify what I wanted to write about. So the book takes you from phase 1, which is ditch the negative, bring to life or bring to front of mind what it is that you want to change. Phase 2 is actually making that change. It's a 7-step process. And then phase 3 is boost the positive. So how do we keep these habits? How do we stay healthy? How do we maintain the hardware that is our brain so that we can continue to make these software upgrades?
And that 3-step program, like I said, is super tangible. And there's very simple things in there too, like get more sleep or get more quality sleep. But then you go into why.
Yes.
And so could we talk about sleep a little bit? Because I know a lot of people know about sleep and they know they should be getting better sleep, but the why and the how is very interesting for people.
Absolutely. And that's what I was going to say. When you give the information, so sometimes I go into corporations and I do public speaking and I work with executives, and I can kind of see the penny drop on, grown men's faces where they go, that makes sense finally, because we know that sleep is good, and people kind of eye roll. They're like, oh God, here we go again with the sleep. But when I explain the mechanisms, you can kind of see people go, okay, that really makes a lot of sense. So sleep is fundamentally your biggest optimization tool. I mean, Matthew Walker said that, he's the author of Why We Sleep. But from a neuroscientific perspective, there's a couple of things that happen when we sleep. Now, firstly, you've got this earlier on in the night, you've got these two slow waves sleeps. So your brain goes into delta waves. That's a very slow wave process where the brain is essentially replenishing a lot of stores. So we have something called the glymphatic system. And this glymphatic system is quite literally a system that comes in and essentially washes the brain with cerebral spinal fluid and gets rid of any toxin buildup. So in the day, if you have stress, you'll have buildups of different byproducts, kynurenine, which is a stress product, and that can cause inflammation in the brain. And they also can cause like pro-depressive symptoms. So sleep can help to clear away these buildups of these sort of byproducts in the brain. Then we also have testosterone release, which is important for both men and women. And we have growth hormone release in our slow wave sleep as well. Growth hormone is responsible for helping us create new cells, helping us replenish not just muscle cells. Everyone associates growth hormone with, gym bros, but it's also vitally important for the regeneration of every single cell in our body all of the time. And if we're not doing that effectively, we can lead to disease, we can lead to tumors, etc. So it's vitally important to sleep. Now, not only that, when we sleep, we are consolidating memories. So when you go about your day and you learn something new or you're acquiring information, the memories and the information are quote unquote fragmented. So they kind of loosely flowing around, for lack of a better term, in the brain. And when you sleep, that's when they become consolidated in the hippocampus, in the short-term memory stores. Those then migrate into other parts of the brain. But essentially, that's where the most rewiring happens. So sleep is actually the most important part of making any change, any behavioral change, any habitual change, or learning something new.
That actually stimulated a lot within me as well, because it really does depend on the brainwave frequencies when you talk about rewiring. Is
Yeah.
that one of the reasons? Because you're talking more from like a chemical standpoint, but
Mhm.
is there anything that has to do with the frequency of the brain when we're sleeping as compared to being awake?
Yeah, so we actually do make plastic changes in all frequencies. But however, there is some research to suggest that we are probably in a higher state of suggestibility when we're in those kind of theta waves, which is slow wave just before you fall asleep. And then in those delta waves, you consolidate a lot of your memories, and then in REM sleep as well. Now, REM sleep is interesting because it's actually where we consolidate emotional experiences. That rapid eye movement is similar to REM or REM therapy. I don't know if you've ever heard of, EMDR therapy. And in EMDR
Mhm.
therapy, you've got this kind of goal directed eye of movement, which helps to reprocess emotions without the fear processing and the stress involved. So REM sleep is vitally important for consolidating memories and kind of getting rid of the emotional burden that comes with some experiences. So you might be stressed at work, or you might have gone through something, traumatic. REM sleep is really important in sort of alleviating that emotional friction that comes with the thoughts and feelings.
So the EMDR is when the eyes are scanning the environment, going back and forth, right? And it kind of takes us out of the emotional centers of the brain. Is that what am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. So in EMDR therapy, they will be doing goal directed eye movements with you. So the therapist will kind of direct your eyes in a particular direction. And what that does is it actually activates an area called the orbitofrontal cortex, which competes for resources with the amygdala. Your amygdala is your fear processing center, and the emotional brain is essentially quietened so that the you can do the sort of talking and the processing of thoughts and emotions without the fear processing involved.
I actually never, until this moment when you just said it, I never correlated rapid eye movement with EMDR. I
Yeah.
have correlated EMDR with like activities. Like I've learned to ride a unicycle as an adult. And
Amazing.
as soon as I get on the unicycle, I'm instantly like smiling, like instantly.
Yeah.
And you are looking around, you're balancing, you're doing all of that. I think that EMDR is this is my personal perspective of it, that it's very superficial in our understanding, and that there's probably more to it having to do with like our entire body. If we imagine going back and forth with our eyes, if we're balancing with our entire body, it could have a more profound effect. At least that's what I experience on a unicycle, for example.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
But the rapid eye movement, so I actually get rapid eye movement when I meditate. I discovered it when I was 19. I was like, why are my eyes like twitching so much? And
Wow.
I have a degree in psychology. So then I learned about rapid eye movement. And I was like, that seems like what I'm doing when I'm meditating, when I'm getting
Wow.
extreme visuals when I meditate.
Love that.
But that's EMDR is amazing the way that you explain it, because it's essentially just getting you out of the anxiety centers of the brain. And like you said, it's competing for resources.
It's like when you go for a walk or you go on your unicycle, you come back and you've thought about the things that are bothering you, but you're in a different state of mind, and you can kind of process them with a lot more of a logical, say, mind state. Don't know if you agree.
Yeah. Well, it's because the logic, what do you think of, let's talk about this. What do you think about the two sides of the brain? Because logic is usually associated to like a left brain thinking, right? Is that a thing? Is left brain, right brain a thing?
No. So we
Okay,
use
yeah. So
both sides of our brain, both equally. However, so for example, language is predominantly in the left brain, but the right brain attaches a comprehension to it and nuance. So you need both to be active. Now, the default mode network is an area, or a network of brain areas that is responsible for creativity. And then the central executive network is, again, an area that is responsible for more logical thinking. And they both reside on both sides. If you look at sort of brain scans of these areas, you'll see they reside on both sides. But what that means is that they actually, again, they work in tandem with one another to some degree. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it. But what that means is that when you are in an internal mind state thinking, you can become very creative, but it's very hard to then write an email. Pondering your 9-year-old life is very hard when you're trying to respond to someone or have a conversation. And sorry, I'm kind of gone off on a tangent, but I wanted to make this point because it's the reason why sometimes people resist wanting to meditate or go into this kind of creative thinking, because it requires you to switch off that sort of, not logic, but that executive function, if that makes sense. So that's why people keep themselves busy, because they don't always want to deal with their own thoughts.
right. And the default mode network and the central executive network, these are amazing things to know about. And it's explained beautifully in your book.
Thank you.
And then they're tied together with, is it the SN?
Yes.
Forget that word.
Salience network.
Salience. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's like the governor of which network we're in.
Yes, and so the word salience is actually a fun word, because salience just means importance. So what it is it's deciding which network is more important, or which sensory information is important. So right now your brain is telling you that I'm important, but if there was a loud bang outside, your attentional networks will be shifted to pay attention to that. Your whole body would turn to see what's going on. That's because it's attaching salience to that sound.
And where do you think everything is going that the salience network or the reticular activating system isn't picking up? Is our body still listening to all of these sounds all day long? And where is it going?
It just filters it out. So I would imagine that you're still sensing it, but it's not being brought to your conscious attention. So that's a very good question. I'm actually going to research that, because I've never had that. But I'm just going to write that down. That's pretty good. Where do they go?
I
Where do they go?
I used to have a friend, a really good friend, who would listen to audiobooks while he slept. And he told me that even though he wasn't consciously aware of the sounds that was coming into his ears, that he was retaining the information. And I always wonder if that's happening with all this information that we're receiving. Like, where is it going, and are we making sense of it somewhere in our field?
That's an interesting topic. Now, from that contradicts what I've written in the book, and I'll explain the science. But it doesn't mean that it's not right or wrong. There's nuance to this. Now, with the adult brain, we do generally need to pay attention to what we want to learn. So we need to say to the brain, this is important, not the sound of the birds outside or my dog shuffling here next to me, who's just decided to wake up and come and give me a big smooch. I don't know if you can hear her, but she's definitely here. So you can't put on a tape of French in the background and expect to learn the words. You have to pay attention to the words. But it does sound, sorry, the neighbor's dog is barking. I don't know if you can hear that. But
I thought that was a
have
rooster.
Okay, well, I do. I live in, there's a lot of animals in this country, so there's a lot of countryside. But I have this theory that when you're more, okay, I'm going down a really woo-woo route, so please, and I think you would appreciate this. When you're more
Yes,
consciously
please.
aware of yourself, and maybe you've reached levels of self-actualization, you're more attuned to your surroundings. So maybe that's why your friend, did you say that he's picking up information from his periphery?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, though. That's just what he used to do, So
I
who
mean,
knows?
maybe. I mean, if you wanted to learn something, you would have to pay attention. It's the reason why you can't go into a neuroscience lecture and text on your phone and then also try and listen to the lecturer. You have to actually really listen to what they're saying, because we have to attach salience to the words that are coming into our brains. Otherwise, the brain doesn't know that this is something that it needs to retain. Because there's so much information in our surroundings. I mean, I'm at my in-laws' house and there's a lot of stuff in his house. It's not my jam, but my brain is constantly filtering out how much stuff is going on in my periphery. And the more that there's going on, the more filtering that there is going on as well. So that happens to us on a daily basis. And we have to tell the brain, okay, I want to pay attention to this thing and then retain the information about whatever this thing is.
I think that makes a lot of sense. At least that's usable to most people. It's usable to me. I could
Yeah.
be reading a book at the moment I start thinking about something else. Like, I'm like, what was even
Yeah.
said the last 2 pages?
Yes, exactly.
You talked about testosterone. Can we go back to that in
Yes.
sleep? And is there a way to enhance that? Like, if you're doing things in your life to enhance your testosterone, does that mean that your brain is going to operate better?
Yeah. So when we sleep, we release testosterone during REM. And if you sleep 8 hours, you will get, I believe it's 5 cycles of REM. So if you're sleeping 6 hours, you're actually dropping out a whole cycle of REM. And that amount of testosterone that you could be getting amounts to around 10 to 15% of your total daily testosterone release. Now, we release testosterone predominantly through sleep. There may be other mechanisms at play during the day, but it's mostly in sleep. So, even I know 10 to 15% may not sound like a lot of people, but it is actually quite a big number. And if you do that enough days in a week, then you're just, setting yourself up for failure. Whether there's other ways to increase testosterone, it's not my area of expertise, but I've
Mm-hmm.
heard that, ice baths, but I'm not sure. It's not my area. I know sleep definitely does, but I'll go with that.
I liked how you talked about ice baths, and you're very specific that ice baths are only beneficial if the person doing the ice bath is not stressed out while doing the ice bath. It
Yeah.
is a stress in itself, and you must remain calm in order to get the benefit from it.
Yeah, so you need that top down regulation. Now, there appears to be a very clear, distinct difference between voluntary stress and involuntary stress. And that's probably down to our mindsets and also like whether we are, again, wanting the situation for us. Because if you have no control or autonomy over something, it can be quite distressing to the human brain. But staying calm in these stressful situations, like an ice bath, can actually help you to gain clarity in stressful situations in life. Because if you think about a boxer in a boxing ring, for example, they have an immense amount of adrenaline coursing their body, but their brain is pretty calm. So they're still able to make rational decisions. And that's a similar concept with the ice baths. You're training yourself to be super stressed physically, but maintain top down regulation. So cognitive control whilst you're in a stressful situation, which will then sort of translate into everyday life. So all of a sudden, your colleague at work doesn't trigger you as much as they did in the past. And you're able to keep your cool in a confrontation at work, for example.
You're saying that there's sort of two mechanisms if we separate the brain from the body, and the body being stressed doesn't necessarily mean that the mind or the brain has to be stressed.
Exactly. We can learn to sort of control those two systems and quote unquote separate them. Again, you can't actually separate them physically, but you can, there's a level of top down regulation where you can control your mind's response.
And are there different hormones or chemicals associated with the body versus the brain?
So they're called norepinephrine in the brain and epinephrine in the body. So epinephrine is adrenaline for anyone that's UK based. The all it is that they're just released from two different areas. So in the brain, norepinephrine is released from an area called the locus cerebralis, and epinephrine in the body is released from the adrenal glands. They are molecularly very similar. They're just released in different places, and they act on different receptors.
That's amazing. Let's talk
Yeah.
about something that everybody has dealt with in their life, breakups. So like, because I get a lot of messages from that, people go through it, right? And
Yeah.
if you had a best friend going through a breakup, like what's your first advice to them?
Well, oh my gosh, so much. But first things first, your brain is going through a withdrawal when you go through a breakup. So you may find yourself wanting to check up on that person, maybe text them, figure out if you've still got it. That's your brain trying to reward seek. It's seeking reward, and it's doing it in the way that it knows best through being in contact with a person, but you're actually delaying the process of getting over the breakup because you're not allowing yourself to kind of go cold turkey. So that's point number one. So what is best is to actually try and find some activities that can help you feel good, that can replace that reward seeking behavior. So that could be, maybe finding a new hobby or hanging out with friends. My suggestion is to not jump into another relationship, ideally, because you don't want to carry that baggage into another one. You want to make sure that you just spend a little bit of time grieving that process. And the other thing that happens is that there's two things I want to talk about. One is that your neural pattern, the firing of your brain, has been ingrained to have this particular person in your life all of the time. So when you walk out of the office, your automatic is to call. When you make coffee in the morning, it's your automatic to make 2 cups or whatever your automatic is. And when that person isn't there, it can be quite distressing to the brain. It's like almost like throwing yourself in the deep end of, like, I don't know, somebody picking you up and like moving you to Australia and saying, get on with it now. It's going to be quite stressful, but you will adjust pretty quickly, provided you're not keeping contact with New York, if that's where you're. I don't know if this metaphor is landing, but New York is the X. If you keep wanting to go back to New York, you're not going to be able to enjoy your life in Australia. I just came up with that. So giving yourself that grace, that it's hard to kind of redo these patterns of behavior and readjusting. You're essentially adjusting your routines, your habits, your thought processes, the way that you interact in the world. And that can be quite distressing. But provided that you're not keeping contact, and I get it, some people have, commitments like children, my current partner's ex and him shared a dog. They had a very amicable relationship. It was actually wonderful for us because we could have the dog and then give it back to her and just kind of share the dog, which was perfect for when we went on holiday. That means that, yeah, if you give yourself that break, you can get over the breakup a lot quicker. Now, there's one more thing that happens, and that is that we have this kind of part of the brain that wants to self-correct. So what tends to happen is we go back in time to try and ruminate and figure out what we could have done differently, because the brain wants to know what to do the next time or what it could have done to fix that situation. the problem is that we can't fix that. We can only use that as information for following relationships. So provided that you are sort of using that time to self-discover, what did you like, what did you not like, how do you want the next one to go, it means that you can actually move into the next relationship with an upgrade. And I don't mean that in the toxic, like you're upgrading from your ex. I mean, as in you're better equipped to know what you want in this further relationship and what you don't want. Because sometimes we don't, right? Sometimes we get into relationships when we're young and we just kind of go with it, and then we change ourselves, and then we kind of forget who we are. But as we get older, we can actually make these kind of conscious decisions about what are the red flags, what do I not want in a person, what do I want in this person, and what are the kind of things that I value, which sometimes I think we lose that opportunity when we go into relationships when we're younger.
Right. You mentioned rumination.
Yeah.
That perfectly explains what it is, but could you elaborate on what rumination is and how to get around doing it so much in a negative way?
Yeah, so rumination is like a cyclical pattern that just keeps you stuck in a loop of worrying and trying to change things, trying to predict the future, and etc. And it's quite a distressing state of mind. Now, in that default mode network that I was talking about, responsible for internal mind wandering, rumination basically occurs in that default mode network when it's hyperactive in a negative way, because it can be hyperactive in a creative way, but it can be hyperactive in a negative way where it's exacerbated with these thoughts of rumination. Now, what that means is that in that default mode network, the thoughts are seemingly incoherent. They don't really have a beginning and an end. They're spontaneous and they kind of just they're like in a loop. I don't know if you can resonate with that, but you feel a particular way, but you don't know how to put it into words. When we actually start to generate words, either through communicating or writing it down or talking about it in therapy or whatever mechanism works best for you, you start to put a narrative, a beginning and an end to the problem. And then you're also activating the frontal cortex, which puts you in a state of trying to reason with the solution and snaps you out of that kind of cyclical internal thinking that is not very constructive.
Right. Because it's just like on repeat without really, like you said, no beginning, no end, it's not solving itself. It's just nagging.
Yes, and this that ties really well with my concept of what I was saying about the central executive network. So what tends to happen is people will try and keep themselves busy so that they don't have to think about the thoughts. So they become workaholics, and then they go out to see friends, and then they come home and they, can't sleep at night, or they pass out and then back to work and never really sit with those thoughts and sift through them properly. And that's why meditation can be so wonderful, because it helps you sort of center and align your thought processes, and kind of the way that I explain it is like you're filtering out the negative thoughts, but it requires you to go into that default mode network. And the default mode network is kind of like it's like a garden. And if you've cultivated it and you've taken care of it and you've watered it, there'll be flowers, there'll be fruit, maybe there'll be trees. But if you haven't and you keep going to work and you keep ignoring it, the weeds are going to overgrow. And then every time you go there, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with this mess. So you just keep yourself even more busy.
Yeah. Are you working with people one-on-one in groups? How do you work with people besides
I
this book?
I gave up a lot of my clients when I went into writing. I do work with one-to-one clients. I've got a couple of one-to-one clients at the moment. I'm not really taking on clients at the moment. I would like to again in the future maybe set up a platform again to like a community platform to help people and group coach. But right now I'm kind of just enjoying the afterglow of having written a book.
Right. And
Yeah.
your Instagram is Nicole Neuroscience, right?
Yes, Nicole's Neuroscience with an S. It's very confusing,
Okay.
but it's like my neuroscience, my version of neuroscience.
Right.
Nicole's
And
Neuroscience.
yes, possessive S. So, and that's your website, nicolesneuroscience.com. Just want to
That's
make, do you have
correct.
a YouTube as
I
well?
don't have a YouTube, but I'm starting one, so keep an ear out for that because it's
Yeah,
coming in July.
that's going to be amazing because these concepts, like visually, if you I mean YouTube could just be talking head, but if you could put visuals to these concepts, they'll blow up
Game
if you could.
changer. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, even the
yeah.
visuals in your book are very helpful, the diagrams and seeing what you're saying.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Is there, so when people get addicted to things, so if we're talking about coffee or work, sex, alcohol, drugs, why is the addiction so like, why does it grab onto people? What is that process? And what can you say about like how we can start to sort of like peel off that addiction from our psyche?
It's a big question and definitely not my area of expertise, but I'll give you my understanding of addiction. So, addiction, okay, dopamine, so the reward pathways. So, dopamine is involved in your sort of pursuit of reward, sort of puts you in motivation drive to gain something. Now, when you experience something really pleasurable, like scrolling on your phone or sex or drugs, alcohol, there'll be a very big dopamine spike. And then in that dopamine spike, there's a pain system that's anchored in that feeling where it wants more of that feeling. So there's a pain pleasure scale. And what that means is that that pain comes in the form of I want more. I want to go back on holiday. I want more chocolate. I want to keep scrolling. I want to have more sort of chaotic sex or whatever it is that you are addicted to. And the more you give into it, the more that pleasure pain scale starts to tilt even more to the point where you're now sitting in an addictive state because you're getting the reward. It's quite a volatile sort of high, quite a volatile drop, and then you're getting it again. The problem is that the more we give into these dopamine hits, the bigger the response needs to be for you to feel the same way. And that is why over time they diminish their effects. You see it in a classic sort of cocaine addiction where someone will start using, they may be using 1 gram a day, and then 2 grams a day is what keeps them going. And then 3 grams a day is what's kind of leveling them out. And to the point where, I have had sort of people in my life that have had cocaine addiction using sort of 8 grams of cocaine at the end of the day, which is crazy. I mean, I didn't even know that that was possible. I mean, in clinic, I've never seen anything like that. But what's really interesting is that that was just stabilizing the person and the dopamine system that was so sort of fried, for lack of a better term. To kind of, before we get that, and substance abuse has a different layer to it because there are sort of mechanistic addiction properties to it, like heroin, for example, will have a sort of withdrawal period again that's much greater, where the frontal cortex is kind of like diminished in activity. And people will sort of think that people with alcohol is just willpower, or cocaine addiction is just willpower, but it's so much more than that. It's the frontal cortex is actually diminished in activity, and it overrides that logical thinking that says if you buy another gram, you're going to end up bankrupt. There's just that logical thinking goes out the window. So I'll put those in a different subcategory and leave that to somebody who's probably a psychiatrist or an addiction specialist, because that's not my area of expertise. But with your everyday kind of addiction, like phones, smoking, sex addictions, sitting with that discomfort of wanting to have more, it means that you can then replenish that kind of pain pleasure scale back to normality. Because with a phone addiction, when you get a nice hit of dopamine through social media, the spike is quite high, but then it's quite a big drop. So then you need more and more and more to feel just as good. And that's why you can find yourself in a reward seeking sort of activity where you're doom scrolling at like 3-4 o'clock, unable to get off of your phone. But if you can sit with that discomfort of, I really want to go on my phone, but I'm not going to, that will level out eventually. And the urge to want to go on your phone won't be as strong anymore.
If you are in the middle of a doom scroll and you know that you've been on for way too long, and obviously the the answer is put the phone down and do
Yes.
like what you need to do. But sometimes that's really hard.
Yeah.
And is there a tool to help that process?
Yes. I've got two. So you can do the 5 second rule where you just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you get off. And you just kind of
I even
quite
felt that
abrupt.
even just you
Yeah.
saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like quite
It's just
abrupt. Exactly, it's quite jarring. Or this is a similarly aligned. You can put an alarm on, and when the alarm goes off, it snaps you out of it. You have to press, stop that, and then that's the opportunity to get off the phone, because this is coming back full circle, and I love this. It's that salience network snapping you out of that doom scroll.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
I actually do this thing where I stomp my foot really loud on the ground. I stomp it and then I go off, and it kind of like snaps me out of it.
Right. Because you do need a slap in the face in that moment.
A little
But
bit.
usually you're just sitting in a couch and you're just so comfortable, and it's like, how do we get out of that comfort? It's a perfect tool.
And just to sort of add to that, when we are on the sofa and you're thinking about needing to work out, of course you're not going to have the motivation if you're lying on your phone on the sofa. You're in a very low baseline state of motivation. As soon as you get up, as soon as you put the phone away, you'll be more inclined to want to go and work out. Now, I actually I try I try and
Oh,
not scroll
good.
on my phone for about 30 minutes before working out, because I don't want to impact my dopamine reward system, so that I'm then more motivated to work out. Because otherwise I'm like kind of slugging through it and I'm like, got to do this last set. I really don't feel like it. Whereas if I haven't been on my phone for about 30 minutes to even an hour, if possible, before that, it's way easier to get going.
So you've recognized the pattern that if you're struggling to get through like a workout, but I'm sure this applies to like work or studying or anything you need to do, mow the lawn. You've recognized the pattern with what you were doing before you started doing that event, like you almost start complaining more if you were on the phone before.
100%.
So I invite everybody to go and just like, whenever you start feeling like, oh, this sucks, think about what you were doing before and stop doing that.
Yeah, because your phone it's always going to be more fun to scroll than it is to, well, for some people, working out is more fun. But for people that struggle to want to get motivated to work out, of course, your phone is going to be more fun. It's like kind of, it's there to give you those nice hits of dopamine. But understanding that means that you can then sort of shift into this kind of like long term goal reward seeking, where you put in the effort for the
Oh,
reward.
so then you're actually basically, if you're on your phone, like up until you're about to go do like a workout, then you're trying to work out like in the crash zone, is basically what you're
To
saying.
to some degree, yes, exactly. And so the rule for dopamine is there needs to be effort for the reward. So there's no morals on dopamine. I mean, it's okay to go on your phone, and I don't, don't condemn it, but it's just being aware of the impact that it may have on you. So when we go into a workout, the dopamine release is a lot slower, and it's like we need that long-term goal. We need to work for it, and our brain will always want to try and prioritize short-term hits versus long-term goals. And that's the kind of the catch, is you need to sort of shift yourself into that understanding that the better goal is in the long term, but you have to work for it. Otherwise, you're just going to be on this volatile kind of highs and low, high and low.
Yeah. I love that I can ask you anything and you have an answer for it in regards to the brain. I really appreciate you saying like, that's not my expertise, but from my perspective, this is what I have to say about it. Why do
Yeah.
you think that you're obsessed with this, or passionate, I should say would be a better word, with brain health?
I mean, I think the more you know, the more you want to know. It's that like perfect trajectory of knowing that you don't know enough, but wanting to continue to know. I mean, I want to live a long, happy life, and I do believe everything in moderation. I know the effects of not living well now, because the problem is that neurodegeneration doesn't start in your 60s and 70s. It starts in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and how you lived your life then. So, I just did a post on alcohol and it went viral, and people are hugely upset with me because I'm apparently trying to tell them to stop drinking. And all it is I want people to understand what it is you're doing, so that you do it with open eyes. If you want to drink, that's fine. Enjoy the occasional drink. But if you're somebody that's using alcohol every day to wind down from work, the data around that is not good. It's showing that it is causing neurodegeneration in the brain, even up to 4 units per week, or as little as 4 units per week. Now, some people commented saying 4 units a week is a lot. To some people, that isn't. I know people that drink wine every single day and they think that that's normal. And that's partly cultural as well. I mean, my family definitely comes from a long line of people who drink in the evening. And I'm thinking about future me as well. You know, I'm in my 30s now and I'm thriving and I'm happy and I'm young, but I want to be, I want to look and feel, I probably won't look exactly like this, but we can age really well, basically, put it that way, if we do take care of ourselves and do everything again with moderation. Now, moderation is an interesting word because that requires people to understand what moderation is in the first place. But that may mean something different to you. But whatever that is to you, then make sure that you're sort of living within the confines of those kind of moderate types of living, whatever that is to you.
And what about memory loss? Is that neurodegeneration?
Potentially, I mean, you know, women suffer with brain fog, especially perimenopausal. That can recover after menopause, or yeah, menopausal. But yes, potentially, I think there's also a really interesting topic around the fact that we age and then we think that we're forgetting things, but we're not forgetting them more than we did when we were younger. We just think that it's age related. And so we feed into this thought pattern that we're starting to forget things. I
Hmm.
am very forgetful. I actually have a great memory, but I'm very forgetful when it comes to everyday things. I mean, my husband's always laughing at me. He's like, "Oh my God, your keys again. Here we go." Like, he's like, he carries my passport for me because he's like, "Please, you will lose it." But it's not because I have a bad memory. It's because I am so like forward thinking. I'm always thinking about the next one. Oh, that email I need to do, and then the dogs need this, and then I need to do that. So when I put down my keys, I'm not paying attention to where I've put them. So it's not that I've forgotten; it's that I didn't encode the memory in the first place because I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings.
That's how I am. I'm so forgetful with everyday average things. I'll lose my wallet like
Yeah,
almost every single day. I lose
yeah,
it like literally
yeah,
every single day. But I can get up and talk to a bunch of people and somehow remember books that I've written and dates
yeah, yeah,
and like
yeah,
how long it takes planets to get around the sun and like all of these weird facts and figures, but I don't know where my wallet's at.
yeah.
And you're saying that it's not memory, it's just that where I'm putting focus doesn't have to do with where my wallet is. It's like my mind is somewhere else.
Exactly. And the thing is, so I'm not saying that memory loss doesn't happen as we age, of course, but there is a very interesting topic around the fact that as we age, we also forget where we put our wallet, but now we start associating it to age related decline. Whereas actually, you've been forgetting your wallet for all of your history of time. And that's an
Probably.
interesting topic because it's interesting how we attach things to age. And I'm very anti saying things like, "Oh, I'm getting old. My back hurts because I'm getting old." No, I've had a bad back since I was 20. It's not because I'm in my 30s. Like I'm very sort of conscious of not feeding into that narrative because I do think that we can age really well. I mean, my 60-year-old mother-in-law, she kicks my ass at tennis every single week. She's so fit and she's really like breaking that kind of like mold of what it is to be 60. I mean, she looks phenomenal as well.
I just started playing tennis a few months ago
Yeah.
and it's really fun.
Yeah.
I actually
I,
just beat my wife for the first time since we started playing yesterday.
amazing. Congratulations. What a feeling.
Yeah, she played when she was younger, so she like smokes me every single time, but I finally triumphed. But probably just
Amazing.
she had a bad day, but we'll see.
Maybe. But I mean, tennis is my favorite game, my absolute favorite game.
And did you play when you were younger too?
I started a year ago.
Cool. And there's science saying that tennis is good for longevity as well, right?
Yes. I mean, all sports. Is that the study that you're quoting that came out recently?
Yeah, I mean I just saw it on a viral reel, right?
Yeah, I
Like
saw that
everyone
reel that
else.
went viral. Yes, yes, yes. I remember the reel. And what's really interesting is that it's not just tennis, it's a lot of things, but there was a lot of socioeconomic kind of statuses attached to tennis playing. I think any sport where it requires you to figure out where the ball is in space, at what trajectory, and at what time you have to hit it back, at what angle. There's a lot of thinking involved. There's a lot of decision making and proprioception involved in a game like tennis, but it doesn't mean that that isn't in a game like basketball or a game
Right.
of, I don't know, hockey or whatever. So I know that study looked at predominantly tennis. So, but yes, I think all sports, whatever it is. My partner does jujitsu. And I don't know if you ever tried it, but it's actually so interesting. It's like a puzzle. You want to sort of get from A to B, and you need to figure out how to do it, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's how they all talk about that sport.
Yeah,
I've never done it. I've fought a lot, but
yeah,
not really done that sport in specific.
yeah.
Just a lot of martial arts type stuff.
Okay, cool.
So what's next for you? Do you have book number 2 coming up? Like what's going on with you?
I'm just going with the flow at the moment. I don't really know. I'm coming to the US for the book launch. I will do some public speaking engagements this year. That's my gig. I love public speaking, and I will. Yeah, I'll see where the wind blows me. I would love to write a second book, but I probably need quite a bit more time for the next one because it would require me to do a fresh set of sort of research, whereas Rewire one, I'd already had a lot of the research in my kind of back pocket from doing public speaking engagements and just knowing the stuff. Whereas I think book number 2 would require me to do a deep dive on neuro research.
It actually reads like a presentation. It's really cool.
Oh, that's really good to know. Thank you. I designed it so that you could dip in and out of each chapter without having read the previous one. I mean, obviously there's cross referencing, but if you are dealing with something like a breakup, or you want to increase your growth mindset, or you want to, I don't know, deal with negativity bias, you can kind of dip in and out and just understand that without having read the whole book from top to front.
Yeah, actually, that makes sense now that I remember back to how the book was written. Well, I really enjoyed it. I actually was telling my wife, I was like, "Hey, you need to read this book. I have it
Oh,
on pre-order. I'm gonna get the physical copy. I'm gonna give it to you."
thank you. Thank you. That's very kind. I'm very impressed with you having read the whole thing on PDF in a few days because, yeah, I love
So
reading hard
yeah,
copy books, but PDFs freak me out a little bit.
so I've developed a so I every time so the good thing about so I used to hate reading physical books because I
Mhm.
couldn't do other things while like because I can read an audible while I'm driving,
Yeah.
and to me I'm just like craving efficiency, and so sitting down and reading a book was a little bit annoying for me to process. But
Yeah.
now I figured out if I put my phone on a tripod, actually it's right here. I use a little
Uh-huh.
tripod so I'm not holding my phone. And then I go
Amazing.
on a walk with my dog while I'm reading. Like I just have a Kindle app, and you can take
Amazing.
PDFs and put them on the Kindle app. And then I'm just like reading while I do
Uh,
things
that's
like
very
walk my
cool.
dog,
Yeah, that's very cool.
which then my dog is happy that he's getting walked multiple times a day.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. I love that. Max, did you hear
Our,
that? She's
well,
like,
uh, yeah. So I invite everybody to follow Nicole's Neuroscience Instagram account
thank you.
and check out her book. And Nicole, thank you so much for making the time to speak with me
Thank
and
you.
being able to just like put all this potent information. I think we got some really golden gems that will help people out, at
Thank
least to
you.
explore into like, maybe I should prioritize sleep. Maybe I should look at drinking. Maybe I should look at phone use. You're helping
Yeah,
out a lot of
absolutely.
people.
And thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful, and I'm grateful to have been able to connect with you.
Yes. All right, everybody. See you next time.
Take care.